known as spooning bridges, and that's what they're called to this day, apparently. Straight ahead is the little Ontario resort town of Gananoque. Gananoque roughly doubles it, quadruples its size during the summer because of tourism. All the islanders buy everything they need there, from matches to fishing gear to bathing suits. And you can organize just about any activity you want, from guided fishing tours for muskie fishing, to water skiing, to kayaking, to the national park islands and camping. They have a wonderful live waterfront theater as well that currently has Mamma Mia playing all summer. It's called the 1000 Islands Playhouse, and you can get there by boat. It has a lovely museum where you can see some of those rum runner boats. You're allowed to wave at our friends in our friendly competition boat. So we're entering what's called the Wanderer's Channel. They didn't ask me what it should be named, and I always think it should have been called the Wandering Channel, the way it wends and weaves through the islands. Coming up on the right is a privately owned island named White Calf Island, with that beautiful brown house on it. Each of the islanders has their own sense of style, of course. Some like it very civilized and manicured, and others like it a little more wildernessy. If you look down over the side, you'll see how close the shallow water is. And that's why we need an expert master mariner to guide us through these narrow waters. The shallow water next to the deep water also means that it's good fish spawning grounds and great for sport fishing. And this is where I caught my muskie a few years ago. On the left is Mudlunta Island with a spooning bridge leading to the barbecue pit. Lovely way to spend the summer. Over to the right is Little White Calf Island. The owner likes that a little more wildernessy feel. If you keep your eyes open for the underwater panther, you'll likely see a few birds here. Great blue herons, swans, perhaps an eagle or a turkey vulture, maybe a loon even. On the right-hand side, McDonald Island. McDonald Island was apparently not named for our first Prime Minister. And you'll see a number of cottages on McDonald Island. And it's a national park island, and you might wonder why they're there, but they were grandfathered in because they were sold before the island was acquired by Parks Canada. And so those folks now live in the comfort of understanding that they'll never have a 25-story condominium going up next door because they're inside a national park. Coming up on the right is one of the most beautiful cottages in this set of islands. It's a beautiful wooden house called La Vignette, and it sits on an island called La Vignette, and they're almost the same size. Friends of the captain, give them a wave. Oh, there she's hooting at us today. Give her a wave. They put up a different flag on that pole every day to challenge us. I think that's the flag of Ireland today. La Vignette, beautiful cottage on a beautiful little island. On the left is Pitch Pine Island, named for the beautiful pine trees on it. Red pines and pitch pines and white pines are emblematic of this part of the world. Pitch Pine Island was originally owned by the father of Canadian geology programs, Arthur Coleman. And if you look up through the trees as we pass the end of Pitch Pine Island on the left, you'll see the cottage that he built called Pinehurst back in 1884. Coming up on the right is Stone Throw Island. And the owners decided it wasn't quite big enough for that lovely big A-frame, so they just extended it by 18 feet. It's harder to do that sort of thing these days. On the left, a gorgeous home, a Queen Anne style home, built in 1890 by a Gananoque carpenter. And it's falling into disrepair. I mentioned that these are handed down. Sometimes I think the families fight over them and then nobody wants to invest to keep them maintained, sadly. Lots of friends of the captain. I'm often asked how many islands are there really, and it's a marketing secret. We want you to come back and count them. We do know how many islands there are, and there are specific criteria to be counted. The first one is it has to be above water. Well, that makes sense. Second one is it has to have a tree on it. I guess it doesn't matter apparently whether the tree is alive or dead. And it has to be of a certain size, at least 12 feet on a side or 4 square meters. So you can own a pretty small rock on the Thousand Islands as long as it's above water and has a tree. You can claim it's an official island in the Thousand Islands, but the number goes up and down because the river level goes up and down. Right now we're just past high water, but the water will go down at least 3 feet more by the time the fall comes. And several islands will reappear from under the river at that time. And in September, when we count the islands, there are 1,864 of them. We're going to show you only the best ones today, of course. On the left-hand side is Sagastawika Island. And coming up at the west end of Sagastawika Island, you'll see a beautiful example of Victorian stick-style architecture. You'll see the boathouse on the river there that was constructed ashore in parts and brought out here by boat and assembled, where it is now, like an IKEA house back in the 1890s. As we pass, take a close look, you can see the house it belongs to up in the trees. The owners have to take very tender, loving care of these wooden houses, more than 100 years old. They often get beat up in the winter, and the river does flood from time to time as well. Victorian stick-style architecture. On the right is Lindsay Island. Lindsay Island is one half privately owned and one half national park. I haven't figured out which half is which yet, the inside half or the outside half. And on the left is Bostwick Island. Bostwick Island is distinguished by two things. One, it has an open-air church on the south side at a place called Half Moon Bay, and the preacher stands behind a pulpit made of granite rock. It's a different religion invited to conduct services every week. Every religion is invited at all times. And all the parishioners come and listen to their favorite sermon in boats. An open-air, on-water church. Bostwick Island on the left is also distinguished because it was the one that had the earliest cottage built on it in this group of islands. Sadly, that cottage burned down in 1884. But if you look up into the trees from where this little gazebo on the dock is, you'll see the subsequent buildings. It's been sold several times. And each of the owners has added a slightly different architectural style to that beautiful wood house up on the hill there. quite an interesting eclectic styled wooden cottage. One of the small islands here is called Isle of View, no doubt because it has a beautiful view, like they all do. But there's a legend among the islanders that if you take your sweetie for a boat ride around Isle of View on a beautiful moonlit night on the river, and as you pass the island, you gaze into your sweetheart's eyes and whisper the name of the island 3 times quickly, marvelous things will happen. I love you, I love you, I love you. It's a dad joke. My daughter wouldn't laugh at it, but thank you. On the right hand side, coming up to Island 5 and Island 6, they're both privately owned. I guess the owners know where they are too, because they never named them. On the charts, they're still just Island 5 and Island 6. Straight ahead is Indiana Island. And I always guess which side we're going. Looks like we're going north today. You can go either side of Indiana Island, just can't go through it. So I guess I'm calling, oh my God, I'm calling north, and Captain Moran has taken us south. It all depends on the wind and the water and the traffic, and of course, I think sometimes they do it just to make me look foolish. So we're going through the beautiful South Channel between Indiana Island on the right and Bostrick Island on the left. Indiana Island was named to that state in the United States. And I understand that the original owners claimed they lived at the end of the longest rural postal route in the world. I guess from Indiana to here. Beautiful island, not likely to go underwater anytime soon. The river does rise and fall quite a bit some years. In 2019 it was up and down about 12 feet. So many of these places were damaged. We're coming to the end of Bostrick Island on the left. And just beyond Bostrick Island you see a smaller island called Mermaid Island. And that's one of the Canadian National Park islands open to the public. It's free for day camping. As I mentioned, for Cedar Island, you pay a fee on the honor system if you stay overnight. These little floating docks provided by Parks Canada are very much in demand in the summer, as you might imagine. But you can't reserve a spot. It's all first come, first served. I've never heard of any fights breaking out about who got there first. But boaters are pretty polite. On the right, you see a privately owned island, and that's island number 1 in the Admiralty Islands, called Windward Island, with a beautiful cabin up in the trees. When I owned a boat or two, we would come down here every weekend in the summer with family and friends and camp out in the islands, do a little fishing. That's when I caught my muskie. And I always wanted to buy a piece of an island, or maybe a whole island, but I haven't won the lottery 3 times in a row yet. Beautiful National Park Island on the left, that's called Aubrey Island, full up with boats. They do come up for sale once in a while, the private ones, but they hardly ever get to the public real estate market. It's generally sold word of mouth. As we swing around in the wandering channel, just off to your right, we're approaching 2 more smaller islands. The closest one is called Pinnacle Island, and it's owned by an American citizen. The one beyond it, similarly, is one that was owned by Captain Chapin, who built his own island that we passed early on. The one with the yellow cottage and green trim. Captain Chapin loaned that to the United States Air Force during World War II for rest and recreation for the air crew. And in between them is another Canada Parks Island called Beau Rivage. You can see the white and brown sign there. and the big yachts tied up. These are all very, very popular islands with boaters and sailors from Kingston. It's only about a half-day sail from Kingston, an hour or so on a motorboat. On the right is Red Horse Island, and it's distinguished because the owners built 5 little man-made islands around it. Some of them have trees and they've become official islands in the Thousand Islands. We're slowing down now to be courteous to the Howe Islander East Ferry, and you'll see this magnificent big ferry on your left as you look forward. It's a great big ferry that's capable of carrying 3 cars at once. It's a cable ferry. It's pulled back and forth across the river on a steel cable under the river, attached to the front and the back of the boat. I asked my Howe Island friends, don't they get frustrated waiting for the ferry sometimes? Because Howe Island, over to your left, has no stores, no shops of any kind to serve 500 people who live there full time. And she laughed. She said, no, that's part of the charm of island life. You have to plan your expeditions. You have to get everything on the mainland. And I said, well, come on now, surely sometimes you're the 10th car in line for a 3-car ferry. And she laughed. She said, yeah, we get pretty good at crossword puzzles too. The magnificent Howe Island ferry on the right. We pass another ferry to Howe Island at the other end of the island up ahead. It's a little bigger. It'll carry 17 cars. So we're now entering what's known as the Bateau Channel, the boat channel in English. And the Bateau Channel was the third of the 3 major channels leading from the St. Lawrence Thousand Islands up to Lake Ontario. And the main channel now is the American Channel, which is on the south side of Wolfe Island. That's the channel of the Great St. Lawrence Seaway. That was the largest project ever undertaken by Canadian and American governments. It opened in 1959, and it allows the 40,000-ton, 700-foot Atlantic freighters to go straight from the ocean to the center of North America in Chicago. And when it opened, the shipping traffic, the last remnants of the shipping traffic that had sustained Kingston's shipping industry vanished, and the shipbuilding industry and the shipping industry went broke in Kingston. The mayor was pretty, calm about it. He said, well, the last of the diminishing number of boats going to Kingston has now disappeared. Kingston became a public service town after that. So there are 3 major channels leading from the Thousand Islands up to Lake Ontario. The American Channel is the Great St. Lawrence Seaway, far to the south of here, south of Wolfe Island. The one we came down is called the Canadian Middle Channel, and it was the busiest channel from about 1830 until 1959. Most of the boats coming up that channel went to Kingston first, and then transshipped the cargo to bigger boats to go up the lakes. But this channel, the Bateau Channel, was the very busiest channel from about 1650 until 1830, when the steamships began to appear on the river. And it's called the Bateau channel for a very good reason. Between here and Montreal, before 1959, there were a series of 12 huge stretches of whitewater rapids. Some of them with standing waves 15 feet high and currents 30 miles an